All right, thank you very much, media team. Um, our speaker tonight is Brother Chibuzor Egbuta. Um, he's someone that we all know. He's someone that we all know. He's currently works as senior manager at Pacific Energy, and before then, he used to work at project as a project engineer at ExxonMobil, and as well as senior project manager before then at Energivo Innovative Systems. He's hold a postgraduate degree in instrumentation and control, and of course, a master's degree in energy, both at Glasgow Caledonian University. He's a husband of one wife, and above all, he's a child of God. So tonight we're going to listen to Brother Chibuzor Egbuta on the topic emotional intelligence. I implore us to sit back, relax as we listen to our speaker tonight. Bro Chibuzor, you can have the floor now. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
Hear me, please? Yes, okay. Thank you for that rather elaborate introduction, Emmanuel. I didn't know you did your background work on me. Nice one. um, I would like to say how honored I am to be selected as a speaker for this leadership program. I'll give thanks to Elder Wigwe for giving me this opportunity. Let's delve right into it. Let me share my screen. If you can see my screen, please indicate.
Yes, it's visible now.
Okay. So, our topic is on emotional intelligence. But I decided to bring it back to our main constituency, which is the church. And with that, we can now delve in and understand what it means. It's a phrase that it's being used nowadays. Everybody talks about emotional intelligence, but nobody really understands the concept. So my idea behind taking on this particular topic was to do a cross-reference with biblical examples so that we can understand what it is and also give practical solutions to improving emotional intelligence within the church. So we'll start with definitions, as we always do. Emotional intelligence was a word coined by a couple of guys back in 1990, and they were psychiatrists. Psychologists. And basically, EI, will shorten emotional intelligence to AI for purpose of this presentation, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. Sometimes you wonder, what would humanity be like if we never had emotions, or we couldn't feel them, or we couldn't keep them in check? God created us in his image, and his emotions are evident in scripture. Biblical emotional intelligence refers to an understanding and an application of emotional intelligence principles within the context of Christian values and teachings from the Bible. It involves recognizing and managing emotions both in oneself and in others, while aligning actions and attitudes with biblical wisdom. In James 1 verse 20 says, human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. That's just using an example of an emotion. Let's move over to the relevance of emotional intelligence in the worship place, just like we have in our church. It creates a supportive environment. AI fosters a sense of belonging and support, as seen in the early church, described in Acts 2:44 to 47. The popular phrase, they were in one accord, we rings in our head whenever we remember the apostles in Acts, where believers shared everything in common and supported each other. They were in one accord, meaning they felt each other's pain, they felt each other's emotions, they understood each other almost at a telepathic level, such that they were all in one accord. Another relevance of emotional intelligence in place of worship, promoting empathetic leadership. If we read that particular passage, it talks about Moses listening to the grievances of the Israelites, and he had to be patient from morning till night, listening to them, complaining about this, complaining about that. As a leader, those are the things we have to take on if we have to foster good emotional intelligence within our community. Fostering deep spiritual growth and connection. Emotional intelligence, understanding, deepens spiritual experiences, as is evident in his interaction with the Samaritan woman. We all remember that story. We all know how her experiences had made her be at that particular point, and how Jesus ministered to her without lack of using the right word, castigating her, and he made an impact on her life. Benefits of AI in the worship place. Of course, it engenders a more cohesive community where everybody feels valued. In the early church, it said all the believers were in one heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possession was theirs, but they shared everything that they had. In this particular verse, it exemplifies the examples on principles of emotional intelligence within the church setting. Secondly, improves member satisfaction and retention. This is very important if we look at the text. That's 2 Timothy 4, 9 to 11, talks about Paul and the ministry in while he was going through his ministry. And he talks about different disciples and how he engaged them and how he brought them back. Even those he had little quarrels with, he had to all bring them back so as to push the word. Enhances spiritual and personal growth. AI helps individuals better understand themselves, their own spiritual journeys, and transformative growth experienced by other disciples. When you see what other disciples are going through, where you see other church members are going through, you can pull a lot of inspiration from that. Let's go over to the components of emotional intelligence. This is the breakdown. What we're going to do basically is to talk about each of these components and express ourselves on them, and also give out practical solutions on how to improve emotional intelligence within the church. One of the major components of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. David is one of the best examples of someone who was very self-aware. He knew right from, if you look at verse 5 from Psalms 51, he talked about him being sinful at birth. From the time his mother conceived him, he was very self-aware of his humanity and the carnal man in him. And this is what helped him defeat that in the long run. Self-regulation, managing emotions and behaviors constructively, exemplified by Jesus' calm response during the storm. We all remember that story. In spite of everything that was going on around him, he only mentioned those words, "Peace, be still." And the waves were calm. He wasn't hysterical like the other disciples. He was regulated. Motivation. What is our motivation? What motivates us as human beings? This is very important when talking about emotional intelligence. In pursuing his goals, Paul did this with energy and perseverance and persistence, despite all the hardships that were thrown at him. Empathy is one of the other components of emotional intelligence. That is understanding and sharing feelings, demonstrated by Jesus weeping at Lazarus' tomb. Jesus cried. He showed his emotions, and this is very important. Also, lastly, social skills, building and maintaining relationships like Barnabas, who mentored and supported Paul, is very also important. Building those social skills, building relationships within the church, within the community, that's also very important for us to learn. So we'll delve into it, delve into each of those 5 points briefly. Self-awareness, and I specified in religious leaders. We are all, this is a leadership program, and there's a saying in safety, if you have when I was offshore, I used to work offshore quite a lot, and in every mirror an offshore platform, you see a sign. It says, safety is your responsibility, whoever is in charge. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the leadership position or you're in a followership position, we should all learn how to be great leaders. Understanding personal emotion is very, very important for people who want to attain, or people already in leadership positions. If you look at the reaction that Peter had in Luke 22:61, which talks about when he was denying Christ and his whole actions, he later in the Bible, later in that story, he reflects and he understood that his actions that day, by cutting off the ear of the guards, running and denying Christ, all were not good. So he had to understand his own personal triggers. As religious leaders, we have to understand our own emotional triggers and how those influence our interactions with other people. And in order to know them, if we know them, we'll be able to control them. Impact on decision making. Self-awareness allows leaders to make more balanced and thoughtful decisions, similar to Solomon's request to govern in wisdom and therefore govern effectively. Reflection and spiritual practice. Regular reflection through prayers, meditation, or journaling can enhance self-awareness, exemplified by Jesus always withdrawing to pray. Jesus demonstrates self-awareness by recognizing his own need for solitude and prayer. Emotional intelligence involves being in tune with one's own emotions, needs, and limits. He knew that he needed time away from the crowds, activities to recharge and maintain his spiritual well-being. Sometimes as leaders, we need to understand our own limitations and find a way to push back and have time to meditate so that we don't burn out, so to say. Move on to the next point, or the next component of emotional intelligence, which is motivation. As human beings, we are motivated by two forces, whether intrinsic or extrinsic. It simply means internal reasons or external motivations. Intrinsic motivations are driven by internal rewards, like personal satisfaction. Some people gain satisfaction by the work that they do, let's say within the church. They don't need anybody giving them praises. They can come in and do their little bit as an intrinsic motivation. Some people have extrinsic motivation, and this involves performing activities to achieve external rewards or to avoid negative outcomes. Both are very important within the church. It's good to have both. Also, another motivation is inspiring congregants. Sharing personal stories of faith and perseverance can inspire and motivate others, as Paul did in his letters to the Corinthians. Aligning personal goals with spiritual missions. Our leaders or people or members of the church seeking leadership positions should always try to align their personal goals with the mission of saving souls, or the mission, whatever mission within the church that they find themselves. Nehemiah, in the verse, Second Nehemiah 2:17-18, talks about building the ruins in Jerusalem, and it's all about aligning his own goals. Sorry, I was moving. Aligning his own goals with the goals of the general church at that time, which was building back the temple in Jerusalem. We go to the next point, the next component of emotional intelligence. Empathy. I think this is one of the major components of emotional intelligence, especially within the church community. Actively listening to congregants' concerns. If we look at the story of Eli and Hannah, at one point, he started to, question her mental state, but upon listening to her and understanding her motivations for wanting a child, he now listened to her, and with that, we all know the story. Demonstrating genuine care and compassion. Simple acts of kindness, such as remembering names, personal details, show congregants they are valued, as Jesus did by healing the sick and feeding the hungry. Jesus went personal. He went down on his knees, he spat in the mud and touched these people, went to their houses, and it was genuine and people felt it. Those are the examples of leadership, empathy we should take on. It also builds trust and a deeper connection. Empathy fosters a trusting environment where congregants feel safe to share their struggles and joy. And that is illustrated by his relationship with his disciples. Jesus said, "I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I've learned from my Father, I've made known to you." He recognized the shift from the servant-master relationship to a more intimate and equal friendship. And this allowed their bond to grow. We'll go to the next point, which is social skills for building an effective, emotionally intelligent community. Effective communication is very important. The way we say things, the tone at which we say things, the timing at which you say things are all very important. You might be trying to pass the right message, but you might be saying it at the wrong time, at the wrong tone, at the wrong setting. So it's important to understand how effective communication can aid emotional intelligence within the church. Encouraging teamwork and collaboration. Acts 2:44-47 illustrates key aspects of emotional intelligence through the early Christians believers, with their commitment to communal living, effective management of resources, understanding and addressing each other's needs. This all happened while they were building up the church, so to speak, at that time. So doing that encourages good social skills and encourages teamwork. The last point is navigating social dynamics within the congregation. Understanding the different social dynamics and workings to ensure inclusivity and harmony, as demonstrated by Jesus' inclusiveness of diverse followers. Jesus spoke to tax collectors, he spoke to Pharisees, he spoke to anybody, he interacted with anybody. And they questioned him. They said, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And he said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." So sometimes it might be involuntary. We look down on certain members. We might think, they belong to a different status. They may belong to a different. Sometimes it might even boil down to little things as mundane as his man looks funny, he dresses funny, you know. We as leaders, we should look past those things and look at the human being in front of us and build those social skills which will bring that individual closer. The last point is self-regulation, managing our stress and emotions. Daniel always, in his room upstairs, will pray 3 times a day. He never missed it, despite the king's decree. And that was his way of communicating with God. That was his way of showing his unwavering commitment to his prayer routine in the face of danger, and shows a deep understanding of his own priorities and his own beliefs. Sorry, skipped over. Supporting, understand. Setting an example of calmness and control. The story of how Jesus Christ was arrested is known to us. As leaders within the church, we should always show control and calmness at all times. Conflict resolution. Leaders who manage their emotions effectively are better equipped to mediate conflicts impartially, as Moses did with the Israelites. You know, that particular verse illustrates key aspects of emotional intelligence through interactions and decisions of Moses and Jethro. Moses' growth in self-awareness, his ability to regulate his response to criticism, and his empathy for the people's needs all show that he was a good example of someone who had emotional intelligence. Next slides deal with practical applications. Like I said, would talk about how we can actually put these things into practice within our church community. The first step is counseling and support. Providing empathetic pastoral care. Listening, you know, listening is a skill that most people really do not have, or they do not pursue. Sometimes people say things and they don't say things, but you can only hear those things when you listen. And you might actually be the old person that would save a life. So providing empathic pastoral care is very important. The example of Christ comforting the sisters of Lazarus when he died is an example of that. Supporting members in crisis. Practical steps including creating support groups or offering resources for professional help, you know, for members or constituents of the church community who are passing through specific hardships. It's a very difficult time, as we all know, and it's very important for us as a community to come together to help those who we know are going through some particular hardships, and this actually brings the church together. Maintaining confidentiality and trust. You know, in speaking and in helping and in listening and in being empathetic, is also very important to share our feelings with others. But it's also very important to also keep the confidentiality of some of these communications. We don't know whether the person wants it out there. We don't know the whole situation. But as a leader, to build that trust, we must be able to keep some things confidential. Worship services, what we can do to have better emotional intelligence during worship services. Designing inclusive and engaging services. You know, one thing I enjoy about our small church in VI is our choir. And I look at the choir, I look at the members, and it's so diverse. Diversity, there's a very big impact on the church. So things like that, bringing different voices, different ideas, different styles. Paul emphasized that the body of Christ is made up of different parts. And so it is. We all have different skills. We all have different ways we can improve one way or the other the atmosphere of service, the atmosphere of the church. We should all be encouraged, and the church leadership should give allowances for these voices and different styles to be heard. Addressing the emotional needs of attendees, often offering moments of reflection, prayer, and support for those in emotional stress, like Jesus provided comfort and teaching about peace. In John 14, verse 27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give it to you as the world will give it to you." Jesus' words are meant to comfort his disciples and show his deep understanding of their fears and uncertainties. And lastly, creating a welcoming atmosphere. Greeters and volunteers should be trained to make attendees feel more welcome and valued the moment they arrive at the church. The early church did that and welcomed new believers with open arms and with that empathy and openness. And those things are very easy to see and gravitate towards. Lastly, we talk about conflict resolution. Mediating disputes within the community. There's no community that doesn't have, especially even the church community has its own disputes. And there are different ways of mediating such disputes. Techniques for effective mediation include listening, finding common ground, and facilitating respectful dialogue, as seen in the Council of Jerusalem for resolving the Gentile question. Promoting reconciliation and forgiveness. This is very important. We human beings tend to hold on to our hurts. Oh, he did this to me, he did this to me, even though we've talked about it, but we still hold on to it. Encouraging congregants to practice forgiveness and understanding, just like Jesus taught about forgiveness in Matthew 18:21-22. Building a culture of open communication. Regularly scheduled open forums such as this or feedback sessions where congregants can voice their concerns, is very important. That particular text, Acts 6:1-7, describes the appointment of 7 men to assist the apostles in addressing the early needs of the Christian community. And you see that they came out with a proposal. I said, so the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, "It will not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit. We will turn this responsibility over to them and will give our attention of prayer and ministry to the word." And they gave the proposal to the group and it was accepted. So using that example, having a culture of openness, not doing things behind, and then all of a sudden it seems the decision is made from the back. Let everybody be taken along so that nobody feels left out. So in conclusion, the way to manage our emotions is to grow in our walk with God. We are transformed through the renewal of our minds and the power of the Holy Spirit. And He's the one that produces us or tells us or instructs us to self-control. We need daily input of scriptural principles, a desire to grow in the knowledge of God, and time spent meditating on God's attributes. We should seek to know more of God and share more of our hearts through God and through prayer, with God through prayer. I think with this, we'll be able to mature in our faith and as well mature emotionally as well. Thank you so much for listening to me. If we have any contributions, this will be the time.
Thank you very much, Brother Chibuzor, for that very inspiring session about emotional intelligence. Um, if we have questions or contribution, we can use the raise hand button um, for this purpose. All right, while we expect people to raise their hands, okay, Elder Chukuma, you can go ahead now. Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Chibuzor, for this enlightening presentation on emotional intelligence. And thank you very much for the way you linked it with Bible principles and Bible stories and the church at large. I mean, all the time I've listened to emotional intelligence, always been about the workplace, which I'm sure you will focus more on next week, and maybe on the more world view of emotional intelligence, as we have all heard it. But the way you focus on the church, it's actually very important, and then I tend to like it, and it's good for all of us to know that all of these principles we have at workplace can also be applied in the church community. But my question is, I'm going to ask a question, and I make a bit of a thank you because I only speak once. My question is on emotional intelligence and social media as it is today. You know, when we have short attention span on virtually everything, how do we employ emotional intelligence in managing the social media space? Because whether we like it or not, everything is moving in that direction. Everything is going online, everything is going on social media. And sooner than later, we really can't do anything without it as it is. So how do we apply it? While you are thinking of how to answer the question, I'd like to thank a few people who I'm seeing for the first time. Chinyere Egbuta from US, Ihani Egbuta from US. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eunice Afolabi. I haven't seen you in a while. I'd also like to thank Nina M. I think that's Nina Egbuta. Thank you very much. And of course, Mommy Olive and Elder Egbuta, thank you very much for joining us. Usually most people who know Portals Outreach knew us from this Tuesday leadership series. Most people had moved on. We always refer to this series because it's what had helped build the church community as it is. It's a place where we learn through the Adventist angle how to be relevant in the marketplace, how to grow our leadership skills and our work skills. So thank you very much for coming. So Chibuzor, you can take on my question.
Okay, thank you. When we're talking about short attention span, it's two things. One, have we addressed what their issues are? Have we listened to people in church? Do we know what their problems are? It might be distractions, it might be things externally that are the cause of the attention span. Secondly, are we being inclusive? Are we speaking in Greek while they hear Yoruba or Igbo or Hausa? You know, sometimes we have to come down to people's level to be able to capture their minds. So I don't know. I mean, I think these are practical ways of addressing. If anybody any other ideas to share, but I think these are practical ways of solving that.
All right, thank you very much. Elder, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you.
All right. Finally, before we move to the next program in the schedule, if you are joining us for the first time, or you are joining us, or you joined very late, the presentation slide will be shared by the organizers, and also you'll be able to have access to the YouTube link for this program, where we've been able to have this program. Yeah, so after the program, you should have access to the YouTube link. It will be shared shortly before the end of this program. Also, if you joined late and you probably didn't get anything from this presentation, there are practically 5 keys of emotional intelligence, like the speaker said, one of which is empathy, effective communication, or what you call social skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-motivation. These are the 5 components of emotional intelligence. And I believe as we reflect on these lessons, it will help us to become better leaders and much more better humans in our society. Thank you very much. After now, we'll be having a prayer request session. If we have any prayer requests, let's indicate.